Hello and welcome back to Rosie Sews Modern Vintage. I'm Rosie and it is really lovely to have you here today. Now I have to make a massive apology because I have been gone from YouTube for so long. It's been nearly 2 months, so I'm so sorry to all of my lovely subscribers. It has just been one of those times of year where, well, I always struggle a little bit with the autumn and the lack of sunshine, but I think with the sort of changes that we've had with lockdown, I'm not going to say anything more about that, it's all just played in my head a little bit and I haven't really felt like I've had the mental energy to be able to film a vlog, but I'm feeling good today, so I thought let's get something on my channel. So thank you so much for coming back. Now what I wanted to talk about today was my 1960s coat that I made from the Sew Over It pattern relaunch. I am one of Sew Over It's pattern insiders, so I get to try the patterns before they're launched, and this one I was super excited to try. I never made a coat before, and so I thought, is this going to be, am I biting off more than I can chew, or is this actually going to be a really great challenge that's going to teach me a lot? And I decided I was going to see it as the second option and that I was going to try and learn as much as I could from it. So let's get right into it. I've got my coffee here, go and grab yours and we can talk all about coat making and pattern matching. So first of all, I'm going to show you a picture of the line drawing for the 1960s coat. It's really lovely, simple design, ever so slightly A-line with either 4 or 8 buttons down the front, depending on whether you go for the cropped style or the mid-length style. So I chose to go for the mid-length, and as I decided to make this coat, I was in contact with Claire and Charlotte over at Emporia Patterns, and they would offered to gift me some fabric for a project. So I thought, this is going to be fantastic, we can combine the two. So I chose the most gorgeous blue and green check wool poly mix, and I was so pleased with it. It's really beautiful, but it wasn't until I got home that I suddenly thought, oh no, now I've chosen a check, I've got to pattern match, and I've not really done a huge amount of pattern matching in my sewing sort of journey. I've done a little bit, like when I made, I don't really remember, but pink gingham skirt and blouse I made from a duvet cover. I did have to do a tiny bit of pattern matching there, but it wasn't a lot, so I thought, am I going to be up to the task? But I thought, I'm just going to give it a go and see how we get on. What I wanted to do is sort of run down a few of my key points for coat making, especially for people who've maybe never made a coat or never made anything really kind of involved, whether it's a coat or whether it's like a ball gown or something. A lot of these points that I'm going to bring out would help with that. And the first point that I wanted to bring out is something that might not seem relevant to start with, but it is to think outside the box, because when you're making a big project like this, you have to make a massive investment in all of the supplies that you need. So for instance, with the Sew Over It coat, you need to buy 3.5 meters of the wool fabric, 2.5 meters of the lining, but then you also need woven fusible interfacing, which is quite expensive, ice wool, which is a little bit like wadding to go over the shoulder, and shoulder pads, oh, and buttons. So fusible interfacing, I can't remember how much I was looking at spending now, but it was going to be about £10 a metre, and I was going to need about 3 metres. And then ice wadding is about £10 a metre, and I only needed half a metre of that really, but nonetheless you have to sort of buy it in minimum quantities, don't you? They just suddenly started to make me think, maybe this coat isn't for me. So then I thought, no, because I really want to make a coat. So I started to think about how I could maybe make get hold of those products, but in a cheaper, more accessible way. So first of all, with the woven interfacing, I bought non-fusible. I managed to find some that was on a special offer on eBay, and I managed to get 5 meters for £6. So that was a massive bargain, and I don't know whether you could always find it that cheap, but anyway, I did. So 5 meters for £6 was a win. Then of course you've got to try and make it stick to the coat. And one of my friends on Instagram suggested that I use spray adhesive. So the spray adhesive was, I think it was £4 for the can, like a big spray can like that. I got it from Screwfix. I felt so weird going into Screwfix thinking nobody's going to be expecting me to buy stuff from here that is for sewing. So anyway, so I got my spray adhesive. So I managed to get the fusible interfacing, instead of being like £30, I managed to do it for £10. So I was really pleased with that. And then the ice wool, which is very similar to wadding, but just I mean, it's made of cotton, but it's just a better quality, more substantial than normal wadding. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go with the normal wadding. I know that it's not the recommended item to use, but how bad can it really be? And I used it, and do you know what, it's turned out absolutely fine. If I was investing a lot of money in like maybe expensive wool fabric, I'd think, yeah, this coat has got to last me for years and years and years. I want to use the best quality interior sort of products as I can, as well as the ones that are on the outside on show. But for my first go, I thought I don't want to invest lots of money for something that might actually not turn out as well as I'd hoped. So I'm really pleased that I did it, and to be honest, I would do it exactly the same again if I ever made another coat, because I'm really happy with the results. I bought my interfacing off eBay. I bought my just normal shoulder pads out of Fabricland, and then I also bought just navy buttons to go on the front. I did make a stupid mistake and bought 6 instead of 8, but anyway, never mind. Still, I'm happy with the way it looks, so that's okay. So that's for sort of collecting all of the things that you're going to need to use for your project. That's that first point, is just to think outside the box. Try and think of a few ways you can maybe find things that aren't going to cost you as much money on your first go. Second piece of advice I would give to starting a big project is to take one step at a time. When I looked at the instructions for the coat, I thought there was only 59 steps, but that was because they hadn't all been updated properly, because I was pattern testing before it was released. And it turned out there was actually 79 steps. That is intimidating, isn't it? When you're used to making a garment that's maybe 20 steps, or maybe 30 even at the most, to see 79 steps, that's so intimidating. So I decided that I was just going to take it really slowly and take it one step at a time. And I just went by one page. So I'd do all of the instructions on a page, and then I'd pause for breath, and then I'd regroup and start with the next page. And I found that much more doable. I didn't get overwhelmed at all, which I really thought I would do. And I just found the whole process just really enjoyable, because I was just doing each individual step as it came, rather than thinking, right, in a minute I've got to do this, and in a minute I've got to do that, and sort of having it all building up in my mind, and not really feeling comfortable with any of the steps. I also think it's very important, sort of going back again to this, taking it one step at a time, to take regular breaks, because again, these steps are quite complicated, so they are stretching your mind, and as we all know, when we get tired, we never really do such a good job of things. It's always best when we're fresh. So definitely take breaks, whether that's just stopping for a coffee, and you know, do a bit of texting on your phone, or looking at Instagram or whatever, or whether it's actually saying, right, that's enough for today, I'm gonna start again tomorrow. Just listen to your own mind and body really, and see how you're feeling, but just make sure you're not trying to do it when you're feeling really exhausted. So the next one I wanted to talk about was pattern matching, because pattern matching is something that not only was useful when making this coat, but it's also useful when we do a lot of other sewing. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. So the first point that I would make when it comes to pattern matching is to just take a look at the overall pattern of the fabric and pick a point that you're going to use as your sort of landmark, almost, that you're always going to refer back to. So for me, when I was making the coat, I decided that the bottom was going to finish on this blue line, the very bottom, that before you hem it. So I based all of my cutting, I pasted every pattern piece, there's quite a few because there's the 2 fronts, 2 sides and the back. So all 5 of those pieces I made sure started on the blue solid line, and I just cut to the edge of that blue solid line before it became green again. So I made sure it was just stopped on that solid line. And that really helped because then I knew that my fabric was cut pretty much to match, and that then the pattern matching wasn't going to be so difficult. Once I'd done that, the next step was to keep checking, just check a million times, because even before you cut out, again, just keep checking. Maybe also just check where the armhole seam finishes, the seam allowance finishes, and just check that that's going to match the seam allowance that's going to be matching up together from the other pattern piece. You know, we hear the phrase measure twice, cut once, but actually in this occasion I would say measure 3 million times and cut once, because you can just never be too careful when it comes to how you're cutting it, because if you cut it wrong, that's it, you've lost your chance. And that's game over. So really be careful with that. I've got my list here of things to remember to say. And then, yeah, aim for certain areas to match. So because your coat or whatever you're making is not just a flat piece of fabric, you are going to be basically moulding it around your body. Not every single part of the pattern is going to match. It's just not. It's not scientifically possible. So you have to just aim for certain points in your garment that you want to match up. Now for me, I wanted those places to be on the front, across where the buttons go, on the back because there's a back seam, and I also wanted them to match on the side seams. So on the front, I'm really happy with, as you can see, I've got the buttons done up, and you can see that this really matches really well, and I'm chuffed to bits with that. But here's the side seam, and as you can see, it doesn't match up there, which is really annoying. But, and now comes to my final step, don't stress about it, because if you've matched it on certain places successfully, people aren't necessarily going to notice all the rest. And I think that's really important when making any sort of involved garment, is that because there are so many steps, you probably are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable, really. And unless you've got a year to make the garment, there might be certain steps that you've made mistakes that you can't go back on, whether it's the way you cut the fabric, whether it's how you sewed that line and that now that line has been overlocked, or there's the lining has gone over it, so there's nothing you can do, whatever. There are certain mistakes that you're just not going to be able to put right. But remember that you are the only person that notices that. So for instance, with my coat, I'll put up a picture here. This is my most liked picture on Instagram, which makes me really chuffed, because I was really proud of myself when I made the coat. But I also knew that there was actually quite a few things I'd done wrong. Number one, I'd only put 6 buttons on and it should have been 8. Number 2, the pattern matching wasn't perfect down the side seams. There's a few other things that I'm not even going to tell you about, but the fact is people liked it and people saw it as a nice garment. And so if you're happy, if you look at it and you feel nice in the mirror when you're wearing it, and if people aren't going to notice the little mistakes that you've made, don't say anything, because actually the overall look is still going to be really impressive. So I suppose really the lesson that I've learned from making a coat is that every project is possible, no matter how big it is, if you take it in small steps. That's the first thing. Not to panic, not to try and run ahead of myself, but to try and take regular breaks so that I'm always fresh, and to be really careful when I'm trying with the details. And then finally, just not to stress when little things do go wrong, because likely it's only me that's going to notice them. I hope that's been helpful to you. I hope it might inspire you to have a go at a bigger project, perhaps a coat. The 1960s coat I can thoroughly recommend as being a really great pattern to follow. Or perhaps it would be something else, another coat that you've seen that you'd like to try. Do let me know if you've got any big projects planned. I would love to hear about them, and tag me on Instagram if you decide to do any of these things that I've talked about as well. It would be really lovely to see it. And in the meantime, happy sewing. Bye.